Smith, touchdown, Alabama!
Intercepted by Kenneth Walker. College hope the Heisman.
They will not catch Lamar Jackson.
35-40, he's on his way. Desmond Howard is going all the way. That is a Heisman Trophy winner.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Hello Heisman from the Varsity Podcast Network, where we talk all things college football and, of course, the Heisman race. J-Ro, what's going on, my man?
All good, all good. Digesting what we've got now. We got a Final Four, but before we get started, we always talk about our vinyl, sometimes our food. What do you got for me this morning?
You know, I gotta go back old school Bill Withers, which is really a great classic album because it's Bill Withers live at Carnegie Hall. So this is a great album. It has one song that I really like that you don't know, a lot of people don't know about, is called "I Can't Write Left-Handed," which is a really strong song. But anyway, so I got a little Bill Withers. How about you, my friend?
Well, you know, speaking of Carnegie Hall, the only concert that I ever saw at Carnegie Hall was one of my all-time favorites. Whoa, I'm going to fall off the chair here. This is my man, Neil Young. Neil Young, I saw him at Carnegie Hall a couple of years ago, and this is after the Gold Rush, which has taken me back to my teenage days. But I would say this, just like going to see a baseball game at Yankee Stadium, or basketball game at Cameron, someplace like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Go to see a concert if you ever get a chance. Doesn't matter, what kind of music it is at Carnegie Hall, because it's crazy. It's the
really?
Acoustics, the atmosphere, everything. If you love music, it's hard not to make it a memorable experience.
Okay, I'll make sure I try to catch a concert at Carnegie Hall. So
yeah. Hey, so we got ourselves a Final Four. What do you think?
We do. We didn't think that we would get to this point. At one point, I suggested we don't even give the trophy away this season. So now we have 4 finalists. Well, it's a pretty interesting list. I actually posted the list on my IG, my Instagram, and I asked the question, "Do you agree?" So you want to go down the list of the finalists? What do you want to do?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So I mean, I think that a couple of them. Actually, I think they're all kind of obvious. I think that, the discussion of the playoff every year is who got left out that shouldn't have been, that should have been there.
Been in it. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that this year I have any quarrel with what they did. There's only one exception. So we've got Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Kenny Pickett, and your guy Aidan Hutchinson. The only guy that is missing from that group that, boy, he's either just got to be kicking himself or scratching his head is Kenneth Walker III. Ends up with, almost 1,700 yards rushing, second in the country to Lou Nichols in yards from scrimmage, or rushing yards, I should say, and yet he's not even in the top 4. And I think it basically has to do with your theory about, the big game, the big stage. Because what happened to him when he was on that big stage,
right.
He really, really laid an egg.
Yeah, and that's what happens to some of these candidates during the season, throughout the season, especially late in the season. And you have a guy like Kenneth Walker III, monster game against Michigan, 5 touchdowns, almost 200 yards rushing. So now the spotlight is on him. And hey, we said it that podcast, he's the front runner. Like, he's the front runner right now. It was his trophy to lose. But when that spotlight gets on you like that, J-Ro, then everyone's paying attention to you. And the next week, don't forget, after the Michigan game, they played Purdue. Not only did they lose the game, but he fumbled the ball too, which is something we hadn't seen Kenneth Walker III do all season. I hadn't seen him put it on the ground. So he fumbled the ball. They actually, they didn't lose because he fumbled, but I believe they did convert that into a score. But anyway, so now it's like, okay, this guy's, human. And then another big stage was the Ohio State game.
Yeah, that's the one
now,
I was talking about.
Yeah, and if you want to really gain momentum or just start to separate yourself from the pack again, that's the stage to do it. and that's the one you say where he really pretty much, the team laid an egg, but his performance, I think he had less than 30 yards rushing on the day, and so at that point, some of the people who were looking at him as the front runner, as that guy, they shifted their attention elsewhere because of that performance on the big stage, and I think that's why he's not in the top 4. But when I put out the question, do you agree, his name came up often. Then my question would be, okay, if you want Kenneth Walker III in the top 4, who are you removing? And that's the conversation that I like to have with people who say he needs to be in it. Okay, if he needs to be in it, then who does he replace? So just interesting conversation, like you said. But it's like the college football playoff is, okay, these are the top 4 teams, but you think this team needs to be in. Okay, well, who should they replace,
Yeah, well, and not only did Michigan State lose badly to Ohio State, not only did Walker have less than 30 yards, but against a team whose defense was certainly, being questioned most of the year. So it wasn't like they were playing the 85 Bears.
Right, exactly.
So I think that underlined the performance. All right, so let's just for a moment talk about Aidan Hutchinson.
Petrus gets the snap. Hutchinson coming. Hutchinson! Sack time! All the way back to the 8-yard line.
Michigan take a timeout.
Because it's such a rarity for a defensive player, to be in the discussion. When was the last time there was a defensive finalist? Manti Te'o from Notre Dame in 2012. And as a matter of fact, you got to go way back. Your guy Charles Woodson won it, of course, in 97.
Yeah.
But before that, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Hugh Green in 1980, the defensive lineman from the University of Pittsburgh. Man, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, it was. you bring up Manti, I think catfish. But it's been a while, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen often. I guess. Well, we can go anywhere with that because I do think that more defensive players should be considered. And we've talked about this earlier in the season. We talked about Alabama's Will Anderson and a couple other players. So I think it's great for the sport in general when these defensive players start to receive this sort of recognition for such a national award. That's not defensive oriented. Aidan has been playing great all season long. Like Aidan has been a very consistent player since week 1, and obviously the final regular season game against the Buckeyes, he really took over defensively, 3 sacks, and just was all over the place. And it's great to see a person, like I said with Kenneth Walker, when you get that spotlight on you, because Aidan has started to receive a lot of attention. So you knew the spotlight was on him. And he delivered in the biggest regular season game of the year for Michigan against Ohio State. So I believe that helped him tremendously. And then obviously they also had the Big Ten championship game against Iowa, which he played very well too. Had another sack. But, people who watch the game can understand how a defensive player, especially a defensive lineman, can affect the game without making sacks or tackles for loss or what have you. So I think people respected what Aidan has been able to do so far, not just the last half of the season, but Corso says the voters, they remember what you do in December. I mean, no, he said November. He said they remember what you do in November, and I think that's what has helped Aidan become a finalist.
Yeah. I always think of this thing outside of those years when it's obvious. I always think of this thing as like a political race, and I imagine Steve Kornacki at the big board breaking down, which areas of the country voted for whom. And think about it this year, you would have to imagine that Bryce Young is going to carry the South.
Here's Bryce stepping up, running room. He's got it. He's going to go all the way. Touchdown, Alabama. What a play. Bryce saw the daylight, and see ya. He took off on an 11-yard touchdown run.
It's funny when you think about this. How many people up there or down there, who are not Alabama fans, are going to not vote for him just because he's from Alabama? Just like how many people who are from Michigan would never vote for C.J. Stroud, or how many people who are from Ohio would never vote for Aidan Hutchinson. But the fact is that there's a heavy concentration in the North and the East. 3 out of the 4 are from the North and the East. So you have to wonder, it's that entire area west of the Mississippi. And I don't know how many votes are out there. So what's the obvious choice?
Right. And I've always said I think there are way, way too many voters to start off with. I think that's the first problem. Way too many voters. And it needs to be, they need to revisit that and do some sort of breakdown where it makes sense, per region, how many voters that you actually have. So now I agree with you. That's a good point. That's a really good point. I think that, you're looking at, a C.J. Stroud, and obviously his last game, was against Michigan. And he played okay. 2 touchdowns. I think he completed like maybe 69% of his passes. I mean, he played okay. Not a Heisman performance, but obviously he had built up so much momentum throughout the regular season that the voters, and I love to see the breakdown, because after the winners announced, J-Row, we do have like a geographic breakdown of the voting and how it shaped up. So I can't wait to see that.
And we love hearing from you, and we remind you that if you want to send us your thoughts or a question, reach out to us on Varsity's Instagram page. And one of the interesting questions we had this week was, how do players, Heisman Trophy winners, just guard against unrealistic expectations in professional football? Well, if you're Desmond Howard, you don't have to worry about it because he won the MVP in the Super Bowl, so we'll just move on from that one. But how about Des, top Heisman Trophy winners of all time? It's an elite group, but among that elite group, do you have any guys that you look at as just entirely iconic of the sport?
Oh, man, I tell you what, J-Row, if I had to go with 3, I've said it before that I was a huge Tony Dorsett fan growing up. I watched him when he was at Pitt and then followed him with the Cowboys. So Tony Dorsett, TD33, that's my guy. And then how could you not include like Charles Woodson? Charles was on the podcast, and he's the only primarily defensive player to win the award. And just an exceptional talent. So Charles Woodson. And then yours truly, won the Heisman in '91. Such a not only a great year, but the pose that we celebrated earlier. A couple of weeks ago, the 30th anniversary of the pose after the punt return against Ohio State. So I would say Tony Dorsett, Charles Woodson, and myself. Now, if I had to increase the list, J-Row, I would go. Bo Jackson was a freak, man. Like, Bo Jackson was incredible. He was insane. So I would say Bo Jackson would be there. And then one of my favorite all-time players was just Barry Sanders, because he was a small guy. I was a small running back until I got to Michigan. And just everything that he did, I mean, he was just incredible for Oklahoma State. So, but, the top 3, I would say Dorsett, Woodson, and Desmond Howard.
So let's see. So your childhood hero, couple of guys from Michigan, a guy from Auburn, and a guy from Oklahoma State. Curiously missing there, the only person to have ever won the award twice, who just happened to have gone to Ohio State. Just a coincidence. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Had a fantastic collegiate career. Just wasn't my type of player, though. I like the guys who were dynamic, like Tony Dorsett, like Barry Sanders. Hey, Archie was a hell of a player. Like you say, he's the only player to ever win it twice. So that speaks to his greatness.
Do you think that anybody's ever going to win this thing twice again, or are they just not going to stick around long enough after they've had such, extraordinary success, definitive success by winning the award?
That's a very, very good question. And that's tough. I don't think we'll see a person win it twice again because of the reasons you just listed. I think guys, they will vote for the NFL if they can. Guys don't want to stick around in college for 4 years anymore. So I think that's that's a tough ask if someone's going to win it twice again. But who knows? It might, because guys are winning it earlier or younger, too, like earlier in their careers too. So if a guy wins the award and he has another year left, that increases the chances he may win it again.
Yeah, who wants to stick around and get a sheepskin? What's that worth?
There you go.
All right, so we've arrived at Heisman weekend. Is there, in your mind, a favorite part? One of our listeners and watchers wants to know a favorite part of Heisman weekend.
Yeah, the favorite part for me is when the former winners, we all get together and it's like a reunion of sorts. Now, obviously, for me, it's a work trip. I'm there for work. I'm a part of the broadcast with Chris Fowler. But when I'm not prepping, because I don't have to do an enormous amount of prep like CF, I'm able to mingle with some of the winners. But what happens is we do a show that morning. Now, see, listen, J-Ro, we used to not do this show. Like, we wouldn't do the Army-Navy game, so we wouldn't have a show that day. So then I would be there earlier. I would get there on a Thursday or a Friday, and then that's when I could really enjoy the festivities of the weekend. But because we do a show Saturday morning, I'm arriving in New York, late that afternoon, going to the hotel, got to change and everything, and then I'm headed to the venue for the actual ceremony. But seeing the former winners and spending that time with them, that's the absolutely best part of that weekend for me.
All right, so one other question on the tail of that. Is there anybody that you've gotten to know over the years and become friendly with that you wouldn't have thought that this is a guy who I'd end up being close to or friendly with or interested in?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that most of the winners, the former winners, are really great guys. They're good people. They're fun to be around. I think that one guy who surprised me was Steve Spurrier, because I just think you look at this guy on the sideline, and I know him as a former coach, not as a former player.
Yep.
And the persona of him on the sideline is pretty, intense, kind of gruff, no nonsense. But when you get to know Steve, he's hilarious.
Yes,
he's
he is.
witty. Yeah, he's just the best to be around. So I would say, that's one of the examples, I guess, that I would provide to answer that question. A guy like Steve Spurrier, who, I was coaching, covering the game. I'm looking at him as a coach. But then when I get to know him, like at the Heisman ceremony, man, he is hilarious. As you know, J-Ro, you've been around Steve Spurrier.
Yeah, he's something else. Well, it's upon us, isn't it? Heisman weekend.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about that. Get a chance to see my guy, Chris Fowler. Thanks again, CF, for doing the show. That was a lot of fun having him on the podcast. And that's it for this episode of Hello Heisman, everybody. Brought to you by the Varsity Podcast Network. This show is produced in partnership with Learfield and Blue Duck Media. I'm Desmond Howard.
And I'm Jimmy Roberts.